Dungeon World 2 is coming, and I have mixed feelings. Let's talk about it. I haven't done this in forever. Now, if this is the first that you're hearing of Dungeon Worlds 2E, I highly recommend clicking right here. I made a video on the subject when it was first announced. And since that initial announcement, a lot has happened. Luke Crane, the guy who owns the Dungeon World IP now, has brought on two designers named Spencer Moore and Helena Rial. I hope I am pronouncing that correctly. Both of them have plenty of credibility when it comes to designing tabletop role-playing games. That's what D&D is. Over the past 5 weeks, these two have been very busy. Starting in probably early March, if I get the exact days wrong, don't crucify me. They have been putting out 2 blog posts a week talking about the development of Dungeon World 2. And apparently the response hasn't been fantastic. Some of it coming from my own community, some of it coming from me. Let's take it just blog post by blog post. After their author introductions, the first thing these two released to the public was their rather ambitious roadmap. They said that Dungeon World 2 is definitely very much still in alpha testing right now, which is really weird to say about a tabletop role-playing game, but makes total sense. They do aim to have a released copy by the end of 2025. And what I think is very cool is they're focusing on the text and the copy of the game itself rather than like the artwork and all that pizzazz. They want to make sure that they have a workable, playable product before they throw on, the product. I forget if Spencer or Helena wrote this blog post, but whoever did said, "Our highest priorities are to make an amazing game that lives up to Dungeon World's legacy and deliver a high quality book into your hands. We may be aiming to finish before 2026, but we will push things back if it results in a better game." And from what I've read so far, they might need to push things back. That's all I'm saying. The real drama begins with the problem with hit points blog post that I think Helena wrote. She says that her and Spencer spent all of October and November digging through the rulebook of Dungeon World and dissecting every little piece that they liked, every single piece that they didn't like, figuring out what needed to go, what could stay. Now, anyone who has been affiliated with Dungeon World in the slightest for the past 13 years knows that hit points have been unbelievably controversial.
You can't have a Dungeon World sucks comment without complaining about the health system.
And in case you can't tell by the name of the blog post, they also are not fans. They said, and I quote, "Dungeon World 2 won't have hit points, HP, or damage dice. The immediate question, of course, is why? Why change such a recognizable mechanic from OG Dungeon World? Why rocking the boat out of the gate? Unnecessarily so, some may say. Because from our perspective, HP doesn't fit Powered by the Apocalypse design." Now, that is a very accurate assessment. For those of you who don't know what Powered by the Apocalypse is, this is not the video to be explaining that, but it's a design philosophy around tabletop role-playing games. Remember, that's what D&D is. Helena is correct when she says that hit points in Powered by the Apocalypse, especially in 2025, don't exactly gel well together. PBTA is all about the narrative. It's all about narrative problems, narrative solutions. Future me put in the meme of Dave Chappelle, you know which one. And hit points are very mechanical. They're not very narrative. But the thing is, hit points are integral to 5th edition's design and D&D's design. Maybe to its detriment, but it's a gameplay mechanic that is insanely recognizable to almost every single person on the planet that has ever played any sort of game. Thus, the inclusion of hit points makes Dungeon World so much more accessible. Anyway, Rael declares 3 things. PBTA is all about creating, sustaining, and pushing narrative, i.e. dramatic momentum. Every move should meaningfully change the fiction, and moves aren't skill checks. Riel further states that hit points by themselves don't really change the fiction unless they hit 0. She says, "Before that last HP, all the procedures are mere accounting. A few points up, a few points down." She then suggests that getting harmed in both Powered by the Apocalypse game design philosophy as well as modern fantasy fiction is only brought up when it's dramatic. Which makes sense in movies and TV shows. You see the hero, gets a million cuts and bruises. They never focus on it. It's only really focused on when it's life-threatening or whatever. She then says that hit points and damage dice are thus incompatible with sort of emulating great fantasy fiction. Now, maybe she's right. Well, she is right when she says that by themselves, hit points don't meaningfully change the fiction. She's also correct when she says that Powered by the Apocalypse game design is all about creating, maintaining, and pushing dramatic momentum forward. And while all of that may be true, what I believe makes Dungeon World isn't that it's fantasy powered by the apocalypse. In fact,
in the year of our Lord 2025,
we already have a ton of fantasy powered by the apocalypse games. There's Chasing Adventure, which one of the authors of Dungeon World 2 literally made. Against the Odds, which Helena Real literally made. Fantasy World, Fellowship 2nd Edition. These are all games that do fantasy powered by the apocalypse. What makes Dungeon World is that it is PBTA for D&D. All Powered by the Apocalypse games seek to emulate some sort of, genre, fantasy fiction, whatever. Masks does superheroes, Cartel does Breaking Bad, Dungeon World does D&D. It's a bridge, it's an olive branch meant to extend to those who have never played a system other than 5e before in their lives and show them that there is something else out there. The recognizability of the sort of antiquated blah, 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 is a key feature of the system because it's recognizable to what people already know and it helps them branch out. It's familiar and it helps shoehorn in the more Englishy components that Dungeon World brings in versus the more mathy of like Pathfinder or D&D. Of course, I get the idea of modernizing. Now, I'm not a game designer in the slightest, but if I wanted to keep hit points but also have sort of narrative consequences, I would do a sort of tiered hit point system. So let's say your fighter has 16 HP, they would have 4 tiers of 4 hit points each. So if you get hit by a monster and you go from like 16 HP to 11 HP, then you can heal up to 12. And like maybe there's like a condition applied or something like that. In order to go back up to 16, then you have to do like a rest or whatever. Like I said, I'm not a game designer, I just kind of threw that out there. Let's move on to the next blog post, which we're only one blog post deep here, folks. Stats, conditions, and defying danger. I think Spencer wrote this, and he starts with, one of our core aims in Dungeon World 2 is to have the mechanics elevate character roleplay. This means inspiring exciting choices, easily assisting expression, and prioritizing narrative cohesion over mechanical limitations. We want to put you on stage, but not trap you in a box. Here's how we hope to do that. Now, I do like this sort of thesis towards game design. Once again, though, I think that for Dungeon World, you have to have a sort of D&D-ness to it. Let's continue. So we've decided to part ways with Strength and the rest of the D&D stats. They're great for other games, but for the character-centric focus of Dungeon World 2, they aren't quite right. Dungeon World 2 stats are evocative adjectives that more directly influence how one might look, feel, and act. Fuck this! This is a reoccurring theme in the video, but the entire point of Dungeon World is to serve as a bridge from D&D and maybe even Pathfinder to like more Powered by the Apocalypse Englishy games and even indie RPGs in general. One of the core pillars holding that bridge up is the stats that anyone who has ever played D&D is familiar with. The 5 stats that they're using to replace the classic ones that we all know are forceful, slippery, astute, intuitive, and compelling. These all sound like great stat names for a different role-playing game. I'm thinking about this through the perspective of my friends who, prior to me getting into alternative RPGs, only ever played D&D before in their lives. My friends had zero desire to try anything outside of D&D 5e. When I tried showing them Masks, it was so weird, it was so different. They were like, we just want to play D&D, man. We want to play real D&D. But then I showed them Dungeon World, and it was similar enough that they felt comfortable trying it. And when they did, they absolutely loved it. Now, he continues on with how they plan on revamping like harm in the game and like inflicting conditions. And there are some game design elements that I really like, which I'm including so that this video isn't me just shitting on everything that they're doing. I really like the fact that they have questions that come with taking a condition. Getting the player to answer what caused the condition, what it looks like, and how the character now acts is so much more conductive to role-playing than just treating them like glorified hit points, which is what Masks does. Ha! And then doing something in the fiction to address the condition. I'm also a big fan of that. It kind of avoids that sort of problem that you have in 5e where it's like you fractured your leg in like 20 places, but then if you just do a short rest, you're fine, which is like kind of weird. Back to the negativity. Moore writes that they're getting rid of Defy Danger, which is, it's a controversial move in original Dungeon World, but you also have to understand that Defy Danger almost serves as a saving throw, which is a familiar mechanic to D&D, obviously, where keep on going around. I'm gonna sound like a broken record. But what they're replacing it with is dumb. they're calling it resistance points. I'll just read what Spencer wrote. When you want to overcome an obstacle, avoid a consequence, or prevent harm, the first thing you do is say no. This could be a severe consequence from a 6- result, or a potential threat warned about by the GM if you go through with something, or a danger happening to someone else nearby. The second thing is say how you stop the consequence. What do you do in the narrative? You probably want to consider the next step while you do this one. The last thing you do is spend resistance, which is a group of meta currencies each adventure has. There is one type of resistance per stat, meaning there is forceful resistance, slippery resistance, astute resistance, etc. That was tough to read. Choose which stat best fits what you described and spend one of its resistance. No rolls, no uncertainty, no immediate risk. You just say no, say how, and spend resistance. Then the consequences just doesn't happen. Now, I really don't like this. I don't like meta currencies that I have to track. That just plays into Schrodinger's game mechanic, where in Powered by the Apocalypse game design, you're supposed to pretend that the game mechanics don't actually exist while you also fully acknowledge that they exist. It's weird. And it just feels lame. It strips an element of the game out. I like the uncertainty. I think the uncertainty is kind of important. But at this point in the releasing of blog post cycles, they clearly got a lot of less enthused people. So the following week, Helena wrote a post called "Who is Dungeon World for?" Or as I put it, Helena addresses the haters. She starts by saying, "The general understanding of both D&D and PBTA have drastically shifted in the time since when OGDW was released. The best PBTA games fixate on a narrow focus of cinematic media, and they build their game around exclusively emulating the stories from those media." I agree with this. PBTA works best when you want to emulate one specific thing. Dungeon World's thing that it's emulating is Dungeons and Dragons. Real continues. Where in the past D&D was known for dungeon survival and powerful treasure, now it's more known for dramatic scenes involving fantasy characters. Which, hard agree. Critical Role has proved this a million times over. Anyway, back to the subject at hand. The type of D&D story we want to emulate is a group of messy people embarking on dangerous fantasy adventures growing into a heroic found family. We want Dungeon World 2 to be the game that you can point to when someone says, "I want a game experience that matches what I've watched/heard/read." The media that was inspired by D&D now in turn inspires us in this new game. We considered other D&D story types, but many Dungeon World hacks or supplements already do them. Perilous Wilds adds exploration to the base game, it's not a separate thing. Stone Top is about community, really want to try that out. Chasing Adventure focuses on action, Against the Odds is about morality, Freebooters on the Frontier leads into OSR-style lethality, and many more. These games all narrow Dungeon World's broad focus into a specific type of D&D story, and that's what we want to do with Dungeon World 2 as well. Which, when she said that, it's like, it makes sense what she's saying. Like, I don't like what they're doing, but like, I see where they're coming from. We want to open up Dungeon World 2 to new fans of both D&D and PBTA games, ones who watch Critical Role and ones who play Masks: A New Generation. We also want to welcome fans who enjoy the middle ground of D&D and PBTA reputation that Dungeon World has developed over the years, who like the simple familiarity yet exciting potential the game provides. Now, from my perspective, just from what I've read of these blog posts, and they've released more blog posts since I wrote these like notes/script, but I just want to focus on these. Honestly, I think the stuff that they've released after this, I haven't really had any problems with. These are the core, like, bleh. But I think they're doing a piss poor job at designing a game that is all about the middle ground of D&D and PBTA. They're throwing away all of the familiarity that I feel like is so integral to what Dungeon World is to lean into PBTA game design, which is totally fine by itself if it wasn't being sold as Dungeon World 2. If this was called like Critical Role World, it sounds like it'd be great, you know, sign me up, but it's called Dungeon World 2. And quite frankly, it reads like they're getting rid of everything that makes Dungeon World Dungeon World. Now, this was the end of the original script/notes that I wrote for this video in this very, you know, poignant end. But then Oblivion Remaster came out, and so I didn't record it last week. And then I saw that Helena Real had done this interview with Rascal News. And there's a couple things that she said in this interview that won me over from the disposition that like her and Spencer were kind of like the Witcher showrunners, where they were just throwing away all the original material to make their own kind of shitty storyline, to they definitely respect the source material. And I don't know, it just won my respect. And so I'm just going to say the things real quick. I'm just going to read this whole paragraph because I think it's gas. A lot of people argue by saying what Dungeon World is. And when they say that, I translate it in my head as, this is what Dungeon World means to me. And that's so valuable. It's precious. It's something that I never want to contradict or say anything to because I don't think they realize this, but there's such a vulnerability there. It's a human thing saying, this is what this means to me. This is what it evokes in me emotionally, and this is the emotional attachment I have to this game. And I'm super conscious now of that load, of that burden. It's like I have your hopes and dreams on my shoulder with Spencer. We're trying to do our best, and I hope that we can, together, we can get a version that it's not going to please everybody. I'm 100% sure of that, but I hope it's going to please a lot more people than it does today. This paragraph comes in a section where she talks about a lot of the criticism that's been lobbied at the game, and the fact that she isn't like high on hubris and being like, well, tough chance, bitch, and being like, no, I get it. Like, this is what it means to you. We need to consider that. We are making basically a legacy product, and we need to consider that legacy in our design. I think is very cool. Maybe I'm putting words in her mouth, but I don't know. I think it's very cool. She also acknowledges what I sort of stated earlier in the video with hit points when she says, I've seen a lot of people being like, for example, with the discussion of hit points, people saying, I know it's not the best. I know conditions are better, but this is the way I can sell this game to my friends because my friends won't play anything that isn't D&D. And when they said that, I was like, shit, you're right. That's something that I hadn't thought about because the people I play with, they have no interest in playing D&D. And if I offer something new, they're going to be happy. They don't care about having those common things, but there are people out there who need that, and I want to offer that to them as much as we can. So I really liked that sort of self-awareness and that ability to say, maybe I'm wrong here, and understanding the other perspective that, you know, someone like me, where I'm like, no, the crossover between D&D and PBTA is incredibly important. I like that she's able to recognize that. I think it's really important, and I'm really excited to see where the game goes forward from here. Obviously, most of this video is me criticizing what they're doing, the hit points, the changing of the stats, I'm not a fan of, but at least one of the developers sounds like she has that awareness. She's in with the community. They're both in the Dungeon World Discord talking with people. I have good hopes. From what I've seen so far, you know, I'm iffy about, but ultimately when the alpha drops or when the beta drops, whatever, we will judge it for ourselves. Anyways, this video is probably unbelievably long. Let me know your thoughts on Dungeon World 2 from what we've seen so far. I would love to read all of your comments and probably argue. And thank you so much for watching.